Hey everybody, I'm back with another video. No, it's not a haul video. I'll get to that soon enough. This time it's another one of my conversational videos for new collectors out there or people that are looking to get into comic book collecting. Um, Came up with a list of things I forget where I got the idea to talk about this topic. I'm sure I got it from somebody on YouTube or whatever. But I've been thinking about it for a little while, and I wrote some things down for people that are interested in starting a comic collection or who have just started a comic book collection, and a couple of things that will get you on your way to this really, really awesome hobby. Now, all these things here's a disclaimer, these are all my opinion. It doesn't mean that what I say is gospel or what I say is, absolute truth. More or less, people, when it comes to collecting anything, you find your own way down the line. You may take heavy influence from the way other people collect, talking about comics, way other people collect, but then you tweak it to your own tastes and your own likes and so forth. So that's all good and all. But this is just, some things that I wanted to talk about. That's my opinion for those that are just getting into the hobby. So, for those that want to get into the hobby, I might want to start a comic book collection, but I have some questions. I'm not really sure where to start. All those sort of things. The first thing that I would ask myself, if I were you, is why do you want to collect? Why do you want to start collecting comic books? It could be a number of different reasons, and none of them are bad. It just depends. Do you want to get into comic book collecting because of investment? Just move this just in case this is a long video and you can't hear me throughout the whole video. I just want to make sure that this is close enough to my mouth. Yeah. So, are you looking to get into comic book collecting because of investment? You think that these books are going to be worth something down the line and you want to sell them and, for whatever. Or are you looking just because hey, I'm interested in collecting, these characters seem really cool and, I've collected things in the past and I'd like to have my own little collection going. I'm not going to talk about investment in this video because this video is probably going to be long as it is. So I would probably make another video for new collectors on investment. Some things about investment in another time, but yeah, because that could be just like a whole video in its own. But for the sake of time and for this video, I'm just going to talk to collectors out there, new collectors or people that want to become collectors. You want to get into the hobby just because hey, I want to start collecting. It may not necessarily be entirely about investment, although that's cool and that might be something to think about, but just want to start a comic book collection, get into the characters and so forth. So that's what this video is for right now. Okay. Maybe you saw the movies that have been coming out over the last 17 years, a little longer, a little less, mainly with the Marvel movies, about almost 10 years now since Iron Man. You see these movies on the screen, or you see the TV shows on Netflix or on regular cable, like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and such. And you're saying, oh, wow, these characters are really cool. I'm really getting into them. They were in comic books. Hey, maybe I'd like to go start collecting some of these. Okay, cool. Well, I don't know if this is the way some people feel, but I know getting into comic books at this stage can be a little overwhelming. It could be a little overwhelming at any stage, really. When I first started getting into them back in the early 90s, it was kind of overwhelming. It could be overwhelming. I wasn't overwhelmed, but I can understand where it could be overwhelming because there's so much to collect nowadays. Sometimes new collectors, now this is just me generally speaking, I'm not saying that this is true of new collectors. This is not the definite truth on new collectors, but I think some feel overwhelmed that there's so many titles out there, and especially those that may have in the back of their minds that this book is going to be worth something. So what do I collect? Do I get everything? My best advice to you for that is to just start out with what you like. believe me, when you start out with something you like, you have more of a focus, and then down the line, you start to branch out into other things, and with that, things will come. Oh, maybe I'll start collecting this, or maybe I'll start collecting that. That might have some value down the line, or it's just because this is what I like. These are the characters I like. These are the stories I like. So, for those that are just starting or want to start, best advice to you, ask yourselves, why is it that I want to get into it? And if it's because I genuinely like the characters, okay, narrow that down. What character or characters do you like the most? Do you like Wolverine? Do you like the X-Men? Do you like the Avengers? And I would start with those. I would start with those. Maybe start collecting Avengers or X-Men. And granted, there are a lot of titles out there. It's a little different today than it was when I first started collecting, and for the people that started collecting before me. Now you have a ton of different titles and so forth. Just start out with the most basic. If you like Avengers, see what the most basic title to start with. Ask your local comic book dealer. Store owner. What's good if you want to start a collection of Avengers, or start to get into the stories of what's going on that may tie into some of the movies, or is mostly related to the movies and the TV series, if that's what you really like. And then they'll figure it. They'll help you out, and start from there. That's the best. Think about start very simple, because it can be overwhelming. Like for me, the best example I could give is my own personal experience. When I first became a collector, I started with X-Men because I liked the cards that came out. Remember the Marvel Master pieces? But I liked the X-Men cartoon, so naturally I gravitated toward X-Men. So that's what I started out with. Now, even back then, X-Men had a few titles. You had Classic X-Men, which were the reprints, the Uncanny X-Men, which was the main series. You had regular X-Men that was started by Jim Lee and Chris Claremont in, 91? So there were a lot. But in the scheme of things, it wasn't that much. So I just stuck with Uncanny X-Men, regular X-Men, and X-Men Unlimited. I avoided everything else. But then eventually in time, I started branching out to other things. When I was really happy with what I was collecting in X-Men, I started taking an interest in Spider-Man, and then I started branching out into Spider-Man. So it will come in time. Don't feel that you need to be collecting everything. Oh, I should be getting all Marvel stuff, or all DC stuff, or a little bit of everything. Just start out with what you like. If you like Preacher, collect Preacher. If you like Walking Dead, because these are things that are on the TV shows. A lot of people, didn't even know Walking Dead was a comic book. I mean, obviously comic book collectors did, people in the industry, but a lot of mainstream, I would say, well, not really mainstream, like regular people didn't even know, oh wow, this was a comic book, and may have gotten interested in reading the trade paperbacks to see how closely the two resembled each other. Like, did this happen in the comic? Did this happen on a TV show only? So start out that way, and eventually you'll find your way. It won't be as overwhelming as it is when you first start. Next thing I want to talk about. Okay, you started your comic collection. Okay, I'm buying some of the new books, getting into that. Should I start getting some older books? Well, that is entirely up to you. When I started, I wanted some of the older books because I was interested in a lot of the origins of these characters, where they first started out. To me, it was interesting to see and to read how the X-Men first encountered the Juggernaut. Like, Juggernaut's been a villain of theirs for many, many years, and they've had many encounters with him. But I'm very interested to see what their first encounter was like when they first met. What was the cause of this conflict? So that made me go look at the old books. Sometimes, though, as maybe some of you are, some of us older collectors know, but some of you newer collectors are starting to realize some of those older books are expensive. It really depends on what books you're getting, of course. Do I get high grade? Do I get low grade? Do I get mid grade? That's really up to you, what you can afford. That's the best advice I can give. And this is not just for new collectors, this advice. This is for old collectors too, collect people that have been collecting for years. Buy what you can afford. Don't overreach. Don't throw yourself into debt because you feel you need to have a high grade copy of, whatever. Oh, I got to have high grade copy. Well, maybe you can get a high grade copy at a later date. If you really feel you must buy something, get what you can afford, and there's always room. As the years move forward, you can always upgrade that book. For instance, if you wanted to get, let's say, Incredible Hulk 181, that's a big popular book. Wolverine is a character that a lot of people I would think, that a lot of people would probably get into. That, The Punisher, Walking Dead comics and stuff like that. I mean, certain characters in Walking Dead, like Michonne and so forth. But so those books are pricey. So how much would it be to get a low-grade Incredible Hulk 181? A lot. I would say at least a few $100s to get a real low grade, like a 3.0. But if that's something that you want, and that's something you can afford, and that's something you could be happy with in your collection, you're not going to get pissed off that you spent a certain amount of money on a book that is a 3.0, then get it. That's up to you. And if down the line you have more money and you really feel that you need to upgrade that book, you can. Yeah, I mean, granted, the book will probably be a little more expensive in theory years from now, but years from now your job situation may be different, where you can afford more. So you can always think of it that way. So don't feel guilty for buying a book that may not be necessarily mid-grade or high grade when you see other people collecting mid or high grades. I learned long ago, and it's not just in comic book collecting, don't be too wrapped up in what other people say and what other people do. I have a very pessimistic look on the world and people, to be quite frank. And I know some people feel the same way. So whenever people say things to me, even though I may smile and go along with it, in here I'm not. So, and that means I pretty much don't put too much stock in what a lot of people say. So if somebody criticizes you because of the way you look or the things you collect, I really couldn't care less. See, coming from a counseling background, I tend to look a little deeper into the person and wonder what's going on in their lives. And I put together pieces of things that they say in the past to sort of come to a conclusion about them. It may be accurate, it may be inaccurate. Most of the time for me, it is accurate because I'm trained to be accurate in those things. And I say, yeah, there are other things going on there. So, point to be made here. Don't put too much stock in what other people think or say. Just try to be comfortable in your own skin and be comfortable what you collect. If you're not comfortable collecting a certain book or whatever, then don't get it. It's just that simple. So, a couple of little things for new collectors. Don't be too caught up with impulse buys, because sometimes that affects all of us. It affects me too. Just try to have a goal. Try to focus. If you want a certain amount of books, if you're looking to complete, let's say, a run. You started collecting New Avengers, and hey, I want to finish that run because I really like the storylines, I like the characters, I like where the writing is going, I like the artwork, all that stuff. But it's going to cost a little bit of money for me to finish that run, or I want to get a big book and it's going to cost a little bit of money. Just be careful, when you go into the stores and you see certain books that might be expensive and you feel the impulse to buy them. You just keep in the back of your head that, you could always get these at another time. They may seem cheap at that time. Sometimes, that's how we get pulled into things. Like, oh, it's at a low price. I don't think I'm going to get this low price anywhere else. Maybe you can't. But at the end of the day, if you complete your goal, if you move toward your goal, you're not going to really care that much about what you pass up. So try to avoid those impulse buys. It will affect you and it will get you from time to time, and you learn from them. But learning from them helps you avoid them in the future. Keeping some things in the back of your mind, having a goal on what you want to collect, helps avoid impulse buys for the most part. Try not to have any regrets. You know, like I was talking about earlier, when you buy something, whether it's low grade or whatever, try not to have any regrets. You know, when you buy something, or you're looking to spend a decent amount of coin on something, consider all the factors. Is this something that I'm going to be happy with? If not, or I'm having doubts, that's a path to regret. So you just might want to avoid that. And be careful of overspending on anything. You know, like impulse buys leads to debt. You don't want to be paying off comic books for years to come just because, you know, you needed to have this book or you needed to have a certain grade. At the end of the day, it's not really worth it. So as I come to a conclusion to this video, I mean, I'm not sure how helpful it was to new collectors out there. I'm hoping it was helpful, but I have a couple of tips for you, a couple more personal tips, you know, from my experience. And I've touched up on this earlier in the video. I buy what I can afford, and keep in mind, and this is true for everybody, you can always upgrade later. You know, it's not that big of a deal to upgrade a minor key. Chances are it's not going to go up too much. All right, so keep that in your mind. You know, you could always upgrade a book later, but buy what you're happy with, buy what you can afford now, and always think about your life situation. Sometimes you can afford to go a little bit more on a book, depending on your life situation. You know, you have a good job, you make good money. You know, ask yourself, are you in that sort of position where it doesn't really matter as much? Do you live at home with your parents? You know, that might make you be able to afford more, because I don't know if you're living home with your parents, if you're paying rent or taxes or putting food on the table or heating the house. You may not be, so then you could afford a little bit more. For me, I'm married. I have a son. I have a house. So those are also things that affect what I buy and what I can afford. So you just take a good look at who you are, what your situation is, and that will determine what you can get, what you can afford. Another little tip, I touched up on this before, low grade books are not, I mean, you know, decent low grade. I'm not talking 0.5s or sometimes 1.0s. Low grade is not necessarily a bad thing. Remember the things I said, don't be influenced by other outside elements. Just be, you know, influence what you like. If you feel you need to get mid-grade books or high-grade books, then that's you. Yeah, that's fine too. But if you don't mind getting low-grade books, but you see other people getting high-grade books, or you hear other people talking poorly about low-grade books, like that long explanation I gave about 5 minutes ago about other people and what they think, try not to be too influenced by that. Another little tip before I close when it comes to buying certain books. Now, this is just me. Yes, sometimes I do buy low-grade books, but I would avoid rusty staples like the plague. You know, there could be a certain amount of rust on a book, on a staple, and it might be a 4.0. Well, in time, it's no longer going to be a 4.0. It will go down to a 3.0 and a 2.5, depending on the level of rust, because it will migrate to the paper and destroy the look and the actual texture of the book. So that's why I personally would avoid getting books with water damage around the staples, where the staples are affected. If you see a book that already has a decent amount of rust migration to the paper, that book has cancer and it is dying. Even though technically the level of damage may register it as a 3.5, it's not going to stay at 3.5 encapsulated. Eventually it's going to go down because it will get worse. It may take a while. You know, it's not going to be something like every week you see it getting worse. But to me, I wouldn't waste money on those. I really wouldn't. Unless it's a gigantic book that is very discounted. Okay? So be careful when it comes to stuff like that, because if you're looking to sell them down the line, they're a hard sell. They really are, because people are thinking the same thing I'm thinking. You know, low grade, one thing. Low grade with rust migration to paper where the book is starting to look ugly and it could potentially get worse and worse in time. Not a good idea. Well, these were just some tips. Like I said, I'll talk more about investment in another video. It's that's a video in and of its own. But thank you for watching. I hope hope this helped you a bit. If you have any questions, you could always ask me in comments. If you like the video, thumbs up. If you want to leave a comment, that's always great. I like interacting with people in the community. Thank you for watching, and take care, everyone.